Have you noticed that I'm not using the words faith, hope, and love much anymore? It's kind of on purpose. If you've been tracking with me over the last year, you know that I've really tried to dive into these words and define them, especially the word love is one of those confusing words. There's a lot of ambiguity around these words. The semantic range of these words is enormous. Semantic range is sort of a fancy technical term, but it just describes the full range of possible meaning of a given word. So if you take, for example, the word can, C-A-N, it could be just like an aluminum can. It could be a can of beans. It could be a toilet, right? Got to go to the can. It could mean the ability to do. I can do it. So here's this little word can that has all these possible meanings. Well, all words have a range of meaning. That's called the semantic range. When it comes to faith, hope, and love, these words have vast meanings and, in fact, in some cases, just really almost contradictory meanings. And so we use these words and we really don't understand what we mean by them. Today I'm going to experiment with a new technological tool, my wife's iPad Pro. So I'll try to show you some things on that and record that. We'll see how it goes. I hope you enjoy. Here for the millionth time is my simple depiction of human existence. I've done this as showing 3 islands, but I've also done it like this as depicted as like a chart. So level 1, level 2, and level 3. And by the way, if you are listening right now, you might find this one helpful to actually look at the video because I'm drawing as I talk, and I'll try to remember to say what I'm doing so you're not totally baffled. But the first level of human existence I just call appetite. And at this level, we are just creatures of desire. When we are born, and I think as you look at other animals, we see that just there's not a self-awareness there. It's just desire drives action. So, and certainly this is like how we are born. But as we develop self-awareness, we cross a line. And this first line I call consciousness. And this is that mysterious thing that's so hard to define, but I am aware of myself. I am self-aware. And that causes me to see things in a very different way. I'm conscious of time passing, and I see myself as a character in a story. So I'm not just a subject. I can also sort of step out of myself and view myself as an object and tell a story about myself. And that's really where human beings exist most of the time. We view ourselves through the lens of story. Story has 3 major components. And when I first began to recognize this, I saw, oh, these are the big 3 from Christianity. Faith, which I'll just put an F there, hope, and love. My faith is the stuff I believe. The story that I'm telling. And that it could be many faceted. It could be a religious story, my family story, my story of gaining a fortune, or I'm a failure, or I'm fat, or whatever the thing is that we're telling ourselves. We have this story framework. The story that we tell us, in turn, causes us to determine what we hope for. For example, if it's a religious story and I'm a Christian, I hope to go to heaven. I hope to please Jesus. And then the story that we tell and then what we are hoping for also then determines what we love and what we hate. And I think you could also say who we love and who we hate. So as a Christian, I love God, I hate the devil. But I also may love other Christians naturally because they share my story, but find people who tear apart our story, those atheists or, whatever. Anyone who's attacking my story becomes an enemy. And so we can sort of lump into tribes. Now, when my Christian story, which was the foundation of my life, When I realized that the fundamental foundational story that I had based my life on was a human creation and didn't hold true to my experience. And of course, I tell all of that in great detail in the story of my fall. So you can, listen to that if you want all the details of that. But when my Christian framework cracked, I was terrified. So without faith, well, life had no meaning. So, that threw me into nihilism. When without hope, with no story, how can there be any hope? So that threw me into despair. And without love, without this God who loved me and this family of believers and people who rallied around me, I felt alienated. So nihilism, despair, and alienation. And those were existential. And so this third level of human existence that I have defined or identified is being. So human beings are creatures of desire, story, but yikes, what do we do when the story breaks? We realize that we are without anything, and it's that what am I is the question. It's an existential question, and that throws us into a terror and into a dark night. That's the chart I started with way back in 2019 or so when I first started to see this picture this way. And as you can see, there's been addition of quite a bit of detail here, but what you will notice is that the words faith, hope, and love aren't even on my description of human being anymore. And it's because the terms are just too broad. So for the story that we tell ourselves, people can mean a lot of different things by that, but it's still, this left column in the blue here is basically faith. And in the green column here, that's what we use the term hope to define. And then the right column in the red is what we use the term love to define. Now, let's look at these one at a time. If we look at faith, well, okay. I told myself a story, the Christian story. I came to recognize that story was broken, and I ran into this specter, the first of the three specters in Yarus, which, to my dismay, I discovered gobbled up all of my stories because it revealed the fact that my stories were human creations. And that was terrifying and threw me into fear. So what did I do when I was afraid? Well, I tried to beef up my story. I would tell a better story. I would find a new story. But then Yarus would gobble that up. And so I would get in this cycle here of fear and fables. What I recognized is that there was another option. When my story broke, there was a choice to say, wait a minute, my fundamental mistake is that I'm pretending as if my story is reality with a capital R, and it's just not. I accept that, I embrace Yarus, and choose, instead of fear, when my story breaks down, I go like, wow, what an amazing world. I understand a tiny fraction of it. I see a tiny percent, but wow. And I go on adventures. So this wonder and adventure. And of course, I've talked a lot about these things. These are the three movements. My point today is that the word faith is used for all of that. So we might talk, for example, about a statement of faith. And by that we mean a very defined statement of beliefs. This is what I put my trust in, this statement of my beliefs. In other words, faith becomes almost this dogma or this concrete story that I trust. On the other hand, we also talk about a leap of faith. And so when our story crumbles, people will say, well, just have faith. Well, have faith in what? Well, just have faith. Just keep believing. Well, believing in what? And again, so we're really talking about making more of a leap. So what do we mean when we use this word faith? Both of those things. This explains why when I was first going through my crisis, I would tell people I'd lost my faith. And they would just turn pale as a ghost and be all concerned for me, like, oh no, now what? And what they were hearing is that I had given up taking these leaps, or saying yes to life in spite of my confusion. They heard me just saying, I give up. Well, that's not really what I meant. What I meant is that I had given up on my fables and that I was trying to find another way to exist, which, as I've said, it has become wonder and adventure. Now let's look at the word hope. Okay, the word hope can be also very concrete. I hope to go to heaven when I die. I hope to win the lottery. I hope I get an A in the class. And the problem with all of our hopes is that even when they come true, they don't deliver all that we hope, all that we thought they would. And so we find ourselves in despair because, well, if we didn't get it, we're bummed that we didn't get it. And if we did get what we were hoping for, we get to this prize, whatever it is, and we find that we still have this longing. And so I called this specter vanitas. It's the one Solomon ran into when he said, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, or Bono, who still hasn't found what he's looking for, etc. So this is part of the human condition, despair and repair. This is, you fall into this cycle where you're just one thing after another, trying to make things better, trying to fix things, and that is a miserable place to live. But it still could be defined by the word hope, right? Don't lose hope. Come up with another plan. Come up with another goal. Live, have this, let that something in the future that you're clinging to, that will fix it. And then when it doesn't, you fall into despair and then you try again, despair and repair. But there's another sense of hope, which I'm calling gratitude and play over here. When I realized I can't reach the end of the rainbow, I recognize I still have a choice. Okay, I can't ever come to this final place of satisfaction where everything's okay, but the joy of living really is in this dynamic tension of reaching ahead and growing and moving forward. So I can choose to give thanks for my life and enter into life not as a series of repairs, but in a playful way that's very much engaged, has goals, striving to be all that I can, trying to achieve things and do things, but not with this idea that I can finally come to the final heaven or whatever this final state of satisfaction may be. I lean into today as the joy of living. So anyway, I've talked more about that too. But again, today, what I want to highlight is that all of that can be defined as hope. Hope could be this very concrete thing that you're shooting for, but hope could also be something more nebulous. So when things fall apart, people will say, well, don't lose hope. In other words, keep trying and be grateful. Go on to the next thing. Let go and try something else, but there's this playful joy and acceptance in that. And so, I just find the word hope also to be too ambiguous. And then there's love, the greatest of all, the worst of all, the most confusing of all. I just discovered that I wanted so much to reach out and just put my arms around everyone. And I kept running into this fact that people's stories caused them to clump into groups. There were tribes. You had to find your tribe because people who undermined your story were dangerous. So when you realized somebody was attacking you or your foundation, your hope, it would make you mad. And then you would go on the attack. And you would try to either avoid them or maybe confront them or straighten them out or fix them or whatever. And so you fall into this cycle of anger and attack. But again, there was another choice. I didn't have to get mad. I could say, oh, we're all in the same boat here. I can choose compassion for other people and express it as kindness. Now, this is contingent upon me accepting the fact that we are all the same, that I really have no right to condemn anyone else because we as a human species are all part of this fabric, which is, as the poet says, red in tooth and claw. It's just the world we live in. But again, the point today is that the word love is used to describe all of this. So I could use love to just describe something really, really, simple as just desire. I love ice cream. I love, sunsets. I love the 49ers. But things that bring me joy, that satisfy me, that make me feel good, I love. And love in that context just means I am attracted to. When I say I love my wife, many times I'm right there. I'm just saying I am attracted to this woman that I married. But it's more than that, right? Because people don't just use the word love to talk about desire. They also can mean by it this really deep, almost transcendental being level thing where we're choosing compassion and kindness. And so love can also mean not just loving what I like, but loving an enemy, or finding this joy in connecting with even people we disagree with, finding compassion in our heart, showing people kindness. So again, this word love is just so broad in meaning that I find it to be really not helpful. I have struggled with language ever since I started this whole process because our words really are inadequate. But we need to try, or I just feel like I need to try to be as clear as I can with them. And for my purposes, the words faith, hope, and love are not that useful when I'm trying to describe my human existence. Now, in terms of my everyday conversation with people, for example, I just use the word love. I walk up to Julie and I say, I love you. And I don't say, well, wait, Julie, what I mean by that is I am attracted to you, I desire you, but also I have this level of compassion that even if you're not attractive to me, I'm there for you. And I don't spell everything out. I just say, I love you. She knows what that means. Same with the words faith and hope. Usually by the context, you can tell what people are talking about. But when it comes to defining a life beyond belief, I think it's really important to understand these things. Because the reason these columns to the left, fear and fables, despair and repair, anger and attack, the reason those are in gray is because those to me are what happen when you face this existential crisis and you bunk your head into that and you go I can't live with that, and you flee back to the story level. So you tell yourself fables, you make repairs, and you go on the attack. And you're in this miserable, impossible state of trying to base your life on a story. But if you hit this existential crisis and you go on to the life beyond belief, and you choose wonder as a foundation, and you say being is the foundational level of my life. I start with wonder, my yes to life, and then I say, well, what adventure will I have? I start with gratitude. I accept my life as I experience it. How will I enter in? How will I express myself? What game will I play? What goal? What mountain will I climb? But it's very different than trying to build a story to justify your existence. It's not like that. You start with this gratitude for your existence. And same with love. I can live in constant anger and frustration about all the stupid idiots out there who don't see things the way I do and go on the attack and just live in this misery of anger and attack and try to, find my tribe and make my tribe conquer the world so that everybody will believe my story and have my goals. And it just doesn't work because our stories get chewed up by the specters. Even if everyone in the world agreed with my story, it still would be a problem because the story is not reality. And the specters would chew up the story even if every human being in the world agreed with it. So I have this choice of compassion and kindness. And so that rather than living in this story-based attack tribal state of mind, I start with my yes, which is compassion. Yes, I see that we're all the same, and I am going to do my very best to connect with other people and show kindness. Doesn't mean that there won't be conflict. Doesn't mean that I won't have to oppose people. It just means that I won't enter into this sort of judgmental, self-righteous zone where I act like I am the creator and all who oppose me are the devil. I hope all of that helped you to see how wide and unfocused we are when we use these three words, faith, hope, and love. It doesn't mean the words are useless, but when we use them, we really have to pay attention to the context to try to understand what people mean by them. And I do believe that our fuzzy thinking around these words really is a reflection of our fuzzy thinking, brain deadness, lack of clarity about what it means to be human. Now, next week, I have a treat for you. Facing Up will have its very first new podcast guest. Carol Kieser will be on the show. Carol was a youth pastor at the Presbyterian Church back when I was a pastor of River Valley in Yuba City. She has had a very interesting journey, which has led her to a life beyond belief of sorts. She's in a bit different place than I am, as probably you are too, but I think you'll really enjoy her story. So look forward to that next week. And as always, my friends, keep facing up.